Emotional labor. Emotional labor. That's interesting. Well, it's interesting because, I'm a guy. For those of you who, have not noticed this, I'm a guy. And not only am I a guy, but I'm a pretty average, what people refer to as like a cissexual guy. I'm not really out there in terms of my gender identity. And neither are most of my friends. And what happens is that when we talk about societal expectations, right, what we expect each other to do, we go back more often than not to like old school notions of, well, we're guys, so we're going to do guy things. We're going to watch sports. We're going to get a girlfriend. We're going to get kids. We're going to make money, that sort of thing. That's the basis, of course. That's not the whole crux of our conversations. But once I started to read about emotional labor, I sort of went into the world of the expectations of women from the time they're born and throughout their lives. And not only that, but I also made connections with all sorts of experience that I've had in my life with my different girlfriends that I've had, with my mother, with my sister, with my friends, situations that they would talk about. And I just didn't have the foundations to understand. I could hear them. I could understand the words they were saying, but I could not understand the emotional reaction, the expectations that were there, the sort of pressure that's constantly on these women, obviously. One question is, I'd like to find out, now that I've read up a bit on this, is does this apply to gender fluid, quote unquote, people like homosexuals, transsexuals, and all the gamut? Like, how do gender roles interact with various gender identities? That's a question I have perhaps for next week. But this week, really, the main subject that I dove into was emotional labor. So let's dive into it. First of all, let's define it. What is emotional labor, and why is it so interesting? Well, originally in the 70s, emotional labor was studied in the context of various jobs, specifically service jobs. And emotional labor was talked about where employees not only had to do a specific physical job, but they also had to do some sort of emotional performance in order to be the best employees they could be where they work. So we all imagine the service worker, the waiter, the waitress, and not only do they have to, deliver plates. I've never been a server, a waiter. But also they have to smile, they have to accommodate, they have to show enthusiasm, they have to do all sorts of emotional things in order to do their jobs correctly. And in the 70s, the context of the conversation was, okay, well, since part of the job is linked to emotional, what we call regulation, where people have to control how they feel and the appearance of emotion, well, how do we make it so that managers and companies and corporations in general have the weapons, so to speak, to make sure that their employees produce the most amount of services, I guess. So that was originally in the 70s. And for a time, there's an interesting research body that appeared, more interesting to me because of my background in psychology, where that sort of studies were applied to physicians and psychiatrists and psychologists and therapists in the context of patient-therapist relationship, where studies looked at, how do we train our physicians to demonstrate empathy and to feel empathy and to be there for their patients better? Because right now, as best as we can't educate people, like pretty much 90% of our education is in books and theory. And then at the end, you get 1 year of supervised residency where you practice on the field with actual patients. And if you do a good job, obviously you're encouraged. And if not, you get some sort of comment from your supervising teacher of some sorts. And so that aspect of emotional labor by itself is interesting. But for me, the main sort of branch that I wanted to talk about today was the topic related to relationships. In my case, what I've been reading, men and women, as well as the expectation that each gender has. So what is expected of men in our society and what is expected of women in our society. And once I opened that box, oh my God, just rainbows and demons and angels just came out. And it was like a whole new way of understanding just about everything in life. I really felt like, imagine you're eating food all your life, but you don't understand the concept of spicy food, right? So anytime that you eat spicy food, you just don't have the words. You don't have the ideas to express that this is what you're tasting. You're like, oh, well, this red pepper over here from Mexico is, it's different, it makes me feel... Makes me feel warm a little bit, I guess. It's a tasty, but not tasty like other. You'd have a hard time explaining and understanding what you're talking about. You need the concept of spicy food, in my example, to be able to talk about certain foods. Well, I would argue that we need the concept of emotional labor to talk about relationships and to talk about how we interact with each other. And so let's dive in. Let's give a few examples to explain what emotional labor is. Well, generally speaking, in my context, emotional labor should be understood as caring. Caring. What I mean by that is, let's say, for example, you live with someone, right? Well, a poor way of living with someone, if you're in a relationship, would be to come home, to not talk to anybody, to watch TV, go to bed, and order food, and not do dishes, not do anything, right? That would be my example of someone who does not care about anything. Alternatively, the other extreme, not the extreme, but the other option would be for someone to live with someone, but ask, how was your day at work? You thought about what food your partner wanted to eat that day, and you bought it, and you made it because you wanted to show your partner that you cared. And also, you don't want to live in an unclean environment, so you also cleaned not only for yourself but for your partner as well. And if it's your partner's birthday, well, you remember that and you plan in advance with the family and friends, and you make sure that you buy a gift that you put some effort into thinking, what kind of gift will my partner enjoy? And then you've bought that gift for them. All these small examples, and I could go on and on, there's about 1 million of them, are what I mean by caring. It's the little extra that people do to show that they care. And I'm going to go on my first musical break here, but after we come back, we're going to explore about how that line about caring is very much different from a woman's perspective and from a man's perspective. So